Thank you. I love how we're sharing music even at this distance, and even this way. This technology, yeah, it's kind of clunky sometimes, but boy, it is making us able to share, and I'm so thankful for that. My sermon this morning is another in our series on the Beatitude windows of our side aisles. This one, the Nicodemus window in our far northwest corner. There are several narratives of Nicodemus in the Gospel according to John. This window depicts his first appearance. And I'll see if I can share that with you. I've got windows floating in all of that. Can you all see that, I hope? Nod if you can, or wave your hand. So there he is, Nicodemus. Our side aisle windows are what are called a triptych, 3 panels. The center figure is always flanked by 2 angelic figures that hold symbols associated with the center figure. So I love this window particularly. All of our windows are gorgeous, the blues especially. But I confess I really like Nicodemus's sporty red shoes. They're really great. There he is holding a lantern as he comes to visit Jesus by night to ask him a very important question. And I'll say more about that in a bit. And the angelic figures on either side are holding the scales of truth and righteousness. Because Connick has chosen this figure and this passage. I'm going to end my sharing now. He has chosen this passage from the Gospel according to John to evoke, but not literally to symbolize, the 4th beatitude that I shared earlier. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Now, all biblical narratives, the story of Nicodemus coming by night, the so-called Sermon on the Mount itself, really all biblical narratives are multivalent. That is, they are capable of carrying several meanings and can be engaged on more than one level. So to begin with, here we have the figure of Nicodemus, a Pharisee and a member of the Sanhedrin, that is, the Jewish council ruling under the power of Rome. As such, he is an important and respected figure, especially in regard to scrupulous adherence to Jewish law and custom, which the Pharisees were particularly interested in. He would have been very concerned about this rabbi, Jesus, and his followers, who, although Jews, were notorious for neglecting, even flouting Jewish laws and customs, following the spiritual leadership of Jesus. Not long before, for example, it was claimed by many that Jesus had been performing miracles. He then engaged in the very public act of driving various money changers and vendors from the inner courts of the temple, the so-called cleansing of the temple. In doing these things, Jesus was coming out of the very tight circle of his disciples into the larger world in a way that was powerful and public. His followers believed that he was claiming his identity as the foretold Messiah, a traditional figure of power and promise. However, there were many ways in which Jesus challenged the conception of who Messiah should be and how Messiah should act. Jesus was not a military leader who would command a powerful army to expel the hated Romans, as some wished. He was not a heroic figure on horseback. In fact, quite the contrary. He had entered the capital, Jerusalem, not on horseback leading troops, but on a donkey leading a few disciples. He did not produce military victories. He produced, his followers claimed, the healing of the sick and the restoration of sight to the blind. Not only did he not conform to the expectations of who Messiah was and how Messiah should behave, but just by the very way he was acting. Indeed, just by the very person he was, Jesus was offensive to Jewish custom. He shared table fellowship with non-Jews, tax collectors, and sinners. Among his disciples were many women to whom he extended acceptance and respect. This was unheard of in the heavily patriarchal Jewish society of the day. In fact, women were among the leading supporters of his ministry. Jesus treated children, who in that age were basically non-persons until they matured, assuming they survived that long. He treated them with respect and dignity. This was not proper behavior for any pious Jewish male, let alone someone acclaimed as Messiah. Yet his followers and his ministry were growing. Many brought their sick and ill to Jesus to be healed, and it was said that they were. The religious authorities, ever concerned with Jewish piety, ever concerned with their own positions of power and control, were in a quandary. Who was this man? Who was this rabbi? Could it be that he was Messiah? Or was he some false prophet and wonder worker? Those had been seen before. This is what Nicodemus was trying to determine when he made his way, carrying his lantern secretly by night, to ask Jesus, "Who are you truly?" He came to Jesus by night because he could not be seen coming to him openly. So offensive were Jesus and his followers. Nicodemus was constrained by his position as a leading authority figure and by his own timidity. Clearly, he intuited that different and unexpected as Jesus was, there was something powerful about him and his ministry. In an act of tremendous courage, Nicodemus, almost in spite of himself, risked his position to ask Jesus face to face, "Who are you truly?" Now, I should pause a moment here to say a word about the whole question of biblical authenticity and authority. Whenever you use engaged scripture, the question immediately arises, is this stuff true? Did any of this really happen in a way that could be historically verified? And let's just leave aside things like walking on water and the other claimed miracles. Once you get past one or two probably historic figures like Paul and Peter, maybe a couple of others, did any of these people actually exist? Let's leave miracles out of it. Did they say and do what it says they did? Was there really a Nicodemus who came to Jesus by night? That's a reasonable question. And the answer is, on a factual basis, we don't know. Nicodemus was a common name. There might have been such a Jewish leader. Remember, this was a pre-literate age. Except for scribes, very few people could read or write. The names and deeds of only a very few famous, powerful figures ever made it into historical records. If we assign value only to those few, we won't have much to go on. I prefer to regard this not literally, but metaphorically. That is to say, the question put into the mouth of our Nicodemus is an important one, whether or not he was an actual historical figure. Who are you truly? It needed to be asked of Jesus then. It needs to be asked today by anyone who cares to take him seriously. Now, one can say, this is not an important question to me. I don't really care who Jesus truly was or is. Fair enough. But if one cares to seek inspiration there, I do think it's a question worth pondering. Now, I said this stuff is multivalent, able to be engaged on many levels. So I would like to move this into another dimension. What could it be like to answer the question, who are you truly? Not as some abstract proposition of theology, but as a matter of truth and righteousness, symbolized by those scales we saw in the window. We can imagine first century Jesus hesitating to answer the question, knowing that it was going to cause him big trouble, certainly leading to his arrest, possibly even to his death. What could it be like for a modern person to answer that question? If the answer would surely get you into big trouble, because your answer was, I am truly a gay man, or a lesbian, or bisexual, or transsexual. What if a truthful answer to that question resulted in shunning by society, perhaps even by family or friends? What if a truthful answer to that question got you fired? What if a truthful answer to that question got you assaulted, perhaps even murdered? I cannot pretend to have any firsthand experience of this. As a cisgendered, white, straight male, in my whole life, I have never had to think twice before answering the question, who are you truly? At least not in that existential dimension. My honest answer to that question cost me nothing. Perhaps even confirmed my membership in the dominant group. Over the years, though, I have become educated in a very different reality, a reality in which an honest answer to that question could be very costly indeed. I have learned from acquaintances, friends and colleagues, people I've served in churches, from courageous writers, thinkers, and artists, and sadly, by the tragic examples of those who have been martyred for simply being who they are. I'm sad about this, and I'm angry. No one should have to pay with their life or livelihood for simply being who they are. And yet here we are, still having to be concerned about this, still having to witness about it, because although things were not completely wonderful before, we now seem to be losing ground. A poll carried out by USA Today just last June, less than a year ago, found some discouraging numbers. I'm going to quote them. The number of Americans age 18 to 34 who are comfortable interacting with LGBTQ people slipped from 53% in 2017 to 45% in 2018, 1 year. The only age group to show a decline, according to the annual Accelerating Acceptance Report. And even that is down from 63% in 2016. Driving the dilution of acceptance are young women whose overall comfort levels plunged from 64% in 2017 to 52% in 2018. Again, 1 year. Says a survey conducted by the Harris Poll on behalf of the LGBTQ advocacy group GLAAD. Among other findings, 36% of young people said they were uncomfortable learning a family member was LGBTQ compared with 29% just a year before. 34% were uncomfortable learning that their doctor was LGBTQ versus 27% a year before, going in the wrong direction. 39% were uncomfortable learning that their child had a school lesson on LGBTQ history versus 30% in 2017. Now, I'm sorry to throw that big snowball of statistics at you. I know it's hard to hold just by hearing them. The point is, we cannot be complacent. We cannot think, well, we solved that problem. No. I love that we have our rainbow flag hung where it is visible to the students of the Hopedale schools. If there is any child walking these streets who is worried about being shunned or even damaged by being who they are, or just by entertaining the question about it, I want them to see that flag. I want them to see that flag symbolizing that there is at least one place of acceptance in Hopedale. And now I don't wish to overstate it. I'm sure there are others as well. But I am proud to serve a church that states unequivocally, if quietly, that we are willing to all answers to that important question. Are you truly? May it be so. May it always be so. I invite you into a moment of reflection.